Did you enjoy
House of the Dragon?
I have strongly mixed feelings.
Greetings, fellow mortals. Just a reminder, saying it's just my opinion is for cowards. A couple of years ago when I made a video about House of the Dragon Season 2, I couldn't really bring myself to judge that chapter of the story as a whole. And in all honesty, you really shouldn't go back and try to watch that video. I had absolutely no idea what my style truly was back then. It was only at the start of 2025 where I thought my videos were any good at all despite my previous best efforts. But anyway, I said that it was difficult to judge House of the Dragon Season 2 because it was 100% a setup season. Everything was about the build to the explosive final conclusion, which seemed to be what Season 3 was planning to do. As such, even though I really didn't enjoy it all that much, I said that I would save my full judgment for Season 2 after I watched Season 3. And now I have to say that Season 2 was boring and it sucked epic donkey balls.
Well, that was pointless.
Because while Season 3 is miles ahead of Season 2 in terms of entertainment value, it was not the grand epic conclusion that it needed to be to justify about 5 things actually happening in the span of, what? Probably 9 hours in total, so there you go. Season 2 sucked and would be best viewed in the span of about a half an hour in a set of clips of the most important parts. Okay, to be fair, maybe 20 minutes, no, 15 minutes of clips. But anyway, I'm willing to leave that behind me and judge Season 3 based on its own merits. And I have to say, I can certainly tell that George R.R. Martin left the show because he couldn't stand conflicting with the showrunner Ryan Condal. I absolutely agree with Martin when he says the statement that House of the Dragon is not my story any longer.
So I am confusion. Why is this one Kansas, but this one is not Arkansas?
Season 2 seemed to be like it was Condal and Martin clashing over what was going to happen. Because very little happened. The brakes were hit so hard on the truck that they left skid marks half a mile down the highway. What do I mean by I can tell that Martin wasn't involved anymore? Well, armor does virtually nothing anymore, getting sliced like butter when the plot demands it. Magic is seeped into every corner of the show. The logistics of marching armies to places has been thrown out the window. A lot of character arcs are either rushed or just outright swept under the rug during the last minute. And most importantly, this has to be by far the season of anything in Game of Thrones where the intimate tension between characters is completely non-existent. Everything and anything that's sexual at all coming off as creepy and disturbing, as though the person writing this thinks that such scenes are gross, unnecessary, or disingenuous. Something to be ashamed of, and that is definitely not George Martin's MO. In fact, the only time where there was any intimacy which didn't come off as "this is messed up" is a lesbian kiss between two actresses who have the romantic chemistry of a wooden plank and a steel slab mashed together.
I'm just saying.
In fact, I could go through and point out which characters definitely didn't exist, had much smaller roles, or even had a more important role in George's original work. And through a bit of online searching and asking mega fans, I've discovered that I was about 80% right in all of my initial feelings. In fact, I have to say, as an adaptation, this is outright abysmal. I can tell that the showrunner outright gave up trying to stick to George's lore. Or the lore of even the Game of Thrones show, if I'm going to be honest here. They're not really similar at all other than having the same names for different characters and locations. So in many ways, this comes off as a Song of Fire and Ice fanfiction more than anything else. And you want to know the interesting thing?
Don't care. Don't care. Still don't care. I don't care.
Yeah, I've never actually read a single word of George's work other than summaries from other people. My plan way back in 2013 when I was just a teenager and I was interested in reading the series before watching the show was to wait until at least Winds of Winter was released. I was sure at that point that it was going to come out somewhat soon. And yeah, you could see how that plan has gone, so I don't know nor care to remember what's accurate in the original text. At this point, I only care about if these shows entertained me. If George at least finished Winds of Winter, I'd read the damn books. Unfortunately, this seems incredibly unlikely at this point based on how defeated Martin seemed during his latest blog post. So I can readily admit that this is a very bad adaptation, but I just simply don't care. It's probably how people who have never played Devil May Cry feel about how bad the Netflix show is. Going to be honest with that one, I couldn't even bring myself to watch season 2 because of how much I disliked it.
I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
That is fine. I simply can't argue with that logic, but I actually really enjoyed this season despite its many, many, many flaws. The first positive that comes to mind is how absolutely gorgeous every single scene is. Netflix's Avatar: The Last Airbender broke me when it comes to effects and lighting. So much so that I am constantly scrutinizing everything before me now to a painful degree. And hot damn if I wasn't impressed by what I saw on my television screen. House of the Dragon Season 3 might be one of the prettiest bits of storytelling that I've seen all year, and this includes the Odyssey, Obsession, Backrooms, Spider-Man. This was just gorgeous.
I've looked at this for 5 hours now.
I know that King's Landing and other locations were used many times before, but the cinematography and the lighting here really made everything pop. The visual storytelling on display, accompanied by an amazing soundtrack, and the effects made it so that I couldn't look away at times, even when I didn't like the writing that was happening on the screen. Each scene had a perfect mood to it. I didn't question the when, the how, or the what of every situation, even though I sometimes questioned the why. My attention was drawn exactly to what was necessary for that scene. Even dark scenes at night were perfectly lit to fit the mood and to make me see what I needed to see, which is something that I can't say for all shows now. Meticulous effort was put into making sure that you were never confused or lost at all, while having just enough variety, lingering moments, and switches of the camera to keep scenes from becoming stale.
No notes?
No notes.
No notes!
No notes.
No notes!
No notes. It's perfect.
The same thing could be said for the effects, the costumes, and the makeup. While the only armor which truly matters in this season is the plot armor, every piece of steel and chainmail looked amazing. Seeing scars and the effects of hordes of people being melted by fire in real time was amazing. Plus, the splattering blood, the beheadings in real time, dismemberments, and flying arrows were incredible. Now, I am shocked that some of these archers can nail shots that even the best modern day snipers in this world would miss even with the help of outside equipment. But whatever, the fighting looked amazing even if it didn't make a whole lot of sense sometimes.
Does that make sense? Ladies and gentlemen, I am not making any sense. None of this makes sense.
If someone was coming up with a battle plan in this season, I can guarantee you that it did not make any sense whatsoever. There is literally a point in the final episode where a character who I'm pretty sure was never named or only briefly named once asked Damon what the plan was. And Damon literally looked at them like Gru did to the minions and just said, "In terms of plan, we have no plan." And then Damon basically just told everyone to die for him. Great morale boost there. Fantastic strategy. Even Damon and Aemon themselves rush into battle without really considering the logistics of anything at all whatsoever. But hot damn, did all that nonsensical violence look good. And I had a fun time watching it all, I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yes, die, die, die! I have everything and you have nothing!
Normally, I wouldn't be thinking too much about all of this. I think what normally helps me overlook all of the different logical holes is that House of the Dragon is filled with stupid people who are very bad at political games and large-scale battle strategy. And to be fair, these are people who have never known this type of grand-scale strategy. 70 to 80 years of peace have made sure that none of them know real combat and warfare on a grand scheme. Except, if they read history books and basic warfare tactics at any point in their lives. These are the elite of this world that we're talking about here. We've seen what can be cooked up by them, because while I cannot fairly compare House of the Dragon to the source material, I can compare it to the original series and the other spin-off which aired this very same year.
And here we go.
Game of Thrones at its peak went into great detail about the specifics of battle strategy in every single conceivable way. It's why the lack of battle strategy is so jarring when this was all left behind in later seasons of Game of Thrones. And the same thing could be said for A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Battles in that show are wild, gritty, dirty, unpredictable, and a little bit terrifying. In comparison, Daemon seems to be doing a lightsaber battle dance during most of his fighting scenes. Fun to look at, admittedly, I do like a good lightsaber battle, but it's a little bit jarring in this specific universe. Especially considering how Sir Dunk handles someone of perhaps similar skill levels of Daemon in the other show. And unlike the source material, I don't feel bad about comparing two shows on the same streaming service, set in the same universe, running at the exact same damn time.
Well, hang on, you've just...
No, I like it. This is brilliant, but I like this.
But like I said, I did in fact enjoy all the fight scenes and grand scale battles. They were great epic fantasy showdowns. Brilliant spectacles of blood and war. In any other franchise, I might not even think about the lack of tactics. It's just that House of the Dragon is stuck between Game of Thrones and A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. I will say I do kind of understand the idea of holding back the dragons or having trouble controlling what to do. Once they are out in the middle of the battlefield, a mass grave is about to be made. Fire just spreads, so once it's unleashed, guess what? A lot of people are gonna get burned, so you gotta be prepared for the consequences if you're gonna unleash the dragons. No matter what, there will be unwanted casualties if you do that, and Rhaenyra's insistence that they be as careful as possible with civilians limits the use of dragons.
He's out of line, but he's right.
But this aspect was where I saw the lack of Martin's influence the most. This felt more like Brandon Sanderson grand battles than George R.R. Martin. Everything looks spectacular, you just have to go into this knowing that everyone is kind of dumb to a small degree, which, to be fair, is established since the very first season. Everyone, even the characters that you like, will make terrible decisions based almost always on their emotions, whims, and insecurities. It's part of the reason I looked past the flaws in most of the logic. These are basically children masquerading as adults, not having a clue what they're doing and freaking out the moment that they're called out on anything that they did which was a mistake.
I have done nothing wrong, ever, in my life.
So when Rhaenyra starts freaking out because people point out to her that her 3 oldest children were with someone that she wasn't married to, I understand that she's going to freak out because she cannot stand to have that fact pointed out to her. And it is very obvious to everyone that that's a fact. When Alicent has to face the fact that she is a terrible mother who raised awful children and is constantly betraying all of said children and all of her family members in general, then I understand when she acts haughty when confronted by the fact that she left all of her babies to the slaughter at some point. So when Daemon recommends the most brutal methods imaginable, despite the fact that more calculated measures would receive much better results, I understand that his pride and his ego don't allow him to hold back. So on and so forth. Aegon's ego, Aemon's mommy issues, Helena being driven by emotion, her own interests and visions. Speaking of which, a Hightower got another one with her, huh? But for the most part, I did feel that the characters were internally consistent with their own selfish self-interest and egotism. They make bad decisions, like, for example, Ormond was so lost in his grief, anger, and ego to figure out that there was absolutely no scenario in which he won, and this was all literally just set up because the writers needed a city burned down to make Rhaenyra look like a monster to the populace. And let me tell you, when something happens, only because the writers randomly need it to happen in order to make the story work without any reason to it at all in universe, then I start to have a big issue with the writing.
Nope, never again.
For example, Daemon didn't demand that Darren's dragon be taken with them as a hostage to King's Landing. Why would he, Daemon, a dragon rider supremacist, leave a dragon in the hands of a Hightower when he could just tell Darren to have the dragon follow them? The simple answer is that Daemon wouldn't do this, but the writers needed this to happen. How did Aemon's dragon Sunfire die and come back to life, or at least be in a coma for months, not moving, eating, or drinking, while no one tried to cut off parts of him? Because the writers needed this to happen. Why was Ulf of all people sent to Tumbleton? He's a drunken fool who is destined to fail unless you keep a constant watch on him. It was obvious to everyone that Rhaenyra needed to keep him under surveillance by her most trusted guards and only have him guard the keep. Literally just send anyone else. But the writers needed this to happen, so all sense and internal consistency was thrown out the window. You see what I'm saying here?
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
There's also how some people are miraculously able to get in and out of cities which are under lockdown. Hugh Hammer and his wife come to mind here, and I liked their story, but both of them getting around so easily is weird. Plus, his wife waited, probably 2 weeks in universe time before assuming that Hugh was dead and moving away? Okay then, if she can get out of there so easily, why didn't Hugh send notice to her? Also, why didn't he drag her out of the city once he became one of the most important people in Rhaenyra's service? You see, this type of thing happens all the time because the writers need for this to happen. They need for logic and reason and internal consistency to not exist to get where they want to be. Also, what was the point of Mysaria as a character in her budding romance with Rhaenyra? Alright, I literally just looked it up. She was originally Daemon's paramour, apparently, not Rhaenyra's. Reading the summary explains a lot about this and why it was all so bad overall as a plotline.
But why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
As you can see, there are a multitude of flaws in the writing, but I will say that the witty dialogue carries the characters still, mostly because of the performances. Because besides how amazing everything looked, including the CGI dragons being perfect in every conceivable way, oh my god, they look so good, the acting was phenomenal in the show, so much so that it equaled the fact that it looked amazing. And this level of performance is especially true from the main cast. While Rhaenyra's descent has been steadier and better paced than Daenerys's by a large margin, it was still very flawed and abrupt at times. It was mostly her performance and visibly growing frustration each and every episode which sold it. Despite the many different scenes which were gorgeous and amazing and just mind-blowing, I think my overall favorite shot was Rhaenyra awkwardly sitting on the Iron Throne with a sword at her hip. Just the perfect visual and the awkward body language showed that her lack of established creed and belief system was going to hold her back. The sight of the sword sheathed at her hip instead of on her lap or off to the side demonstrated that she was not ready for this spot, that she was only going to do half measures and it was going to ruin her. I loved it.
Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
And there is a lot of that visual storytelling in this season, especially with Rhaenyra, Alicent, Daemon, Aegon, and Aemond. Their presence and charisma draw attention to them so that you simply can't ignore them no matter what is happening, despite how terrible their characters are as human beings and people. And that's not to demean everyone else who was in this show. I thought the acting was just superb everywhere. The directing to give such performances and feedback from the actors must have been phenomenal. I want to see more of this, even if some of the writing has gone out the window at times. at least the stressed, emotional, and irrational reactions by the characters do make sense. Once again, there's stupid people making stupid decisions and mistakes all the time. I can accept that fact. It's when they do things that don't fit their characters, break the established rules of this franchise, or the consequences of something are simply a bit too convenient that really ruins everything for me. Once again, the only armor which functions is the writers protecting their favorite characters.
I've only had Arlo for a day and a half. But if anything happened to him, I would kill everyone in this room and then myself.
The writing, on average, is so painfully mid when you consider all different aspects of it. But, and there is a but, all the other parts of the show are so damn good that they're undeniable, leading me to enjoy Season 3 far more than I probably should have as a person who prefers writing more than anything else. And if you can't get over the fact that Martin has been kicked out of the show, that the source material has basically been thrown out the window for the most part, or the fact that there is a problem with the writers making nonsensical stuff happen in order to get to where they want to go with the story, I literally don't have any arguments for you because you're right. If it ruined the experience for you, I totally get it. But the flawless aesthetic, stunning soundtrack, and phenomenal performances carried the fact that the writing simply isn't that good. I will say that I don't think that it was written by AI at the very least. There is that. This is human flawed writing right here, not AI flawed writing.
Really makes you think.
That being said, I did have a realization around the second time that Eamon was having a makeout session with his mother for some reason. Why is all of this incest and grape scenes okay when people give anime the worst grief imaginable? I've heard seasons 2 and 3 of Mushoku Tensei were phenomenally well written from a world building and character study perspective. The problem was that the first season made me feel deeply uncomfortable at times. But here's the thing, that's about at an equal level of weirdness to this show. Plus, there's all the weird stuff in adult fiction advertised to women right now. So, House of the Dragon managed to get me over the hurdle of how weird Rudius is as a character. Time to dive back into that, I guess, with the third season coming out. I mean, come on. I'm gonna have to give you grief if you like Game of Thrones and you don't like that. I mean, what's wrong with you? Are you just inconsistent? My wife doesn't like either of them, so at least she makes sense.
Ah, here we go again.
House of the Dragon is a beautiful mess. I have no way to criticize the cinematography or the performances. But the writing jumps from nonsensical to amazing at a whim. My favorite episodes were 1 and 3, by the way. 1 was because of how tense everything was as people made decisions in the heat of battle without the ability to properly communicate with their allies. And 3 because the fallout of the battles created trouble and stress for Rhaenyra in a perfect way to demonstrate her deteriorating mental state. It reminded me so much about the end of the Poppy War trilogy. A dark fantasy series that I actually did finish and highly recommend. In fact, I think the first 3 episodes overall were the best written, but then it goes from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows near the end from a writing perspective when Aegon randomly finds Aemond, despite the fact that no one has been able to find Aemond all season, and they didn't explain how that happened. Yeah, it's not great stuff at times. Like I said, the writers needed this to happen, so it happened.
It's a travesty of a mockery of a sham, of a mockery of a travesty of 2 mockeries of a sham.
I honestly do hope that House of the Dragon doesn't completely crash and burn like the original Game of Thrones show. I enjoyed this a lot, but I also see a lot of problems popping up that remind me of the original show, especially with them starting, stopping, and delaying story arcs at random times. I want the ending to be solid, but we'll have to wait 2 years to see. At the very least, they can continue making this a beautiful mess that I'll remember for both the best and the worst reasons imaginable. But what do you think? Did you like Season 3 of House of the Dragon? Did you hate it? What parts did you enjoy? What ruined it for you? Please leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And remember, if you disagree with everything I have to say, that is perfectly fine. After all, everyone is entitled to their objectively wrong opinion.
Now we play the waiting game. No, the waiting game sucks. Let's play Hungry Hungry Hippos.
Thank you all so much for watching.
You're still here?
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. You bye. Boom.
Do not despair.